Over to you.
Well, I thought this week we could talk about, I think I'll make it intermittent where we talk about British politics and American politics. Now, even though we're in the middle of a general election campaign, it's extremely boring and there's not a great deal to say. What is interesting is the Trump train and the crash, the car crash that is Hunter Biden's life. In the last week or more, a little bit more, we've had both Trump convicted of 30 plus quote unquote felonies, which was of course, pun intended, trumped up charges. He obviously hasn't done anything wrong at all. The courts, the completely politicized courts, decided that they're going to redefine what it means to pay a lawyer to do some lawyering. So that's nothing. But Hunter did buy a gun in Delaware whilst being a drug addict, which is a felony. And
But that's the only thing they got him on.
Well, he's got another trial in September, so stay tuned for Hunter's second trial in September. Trump's got another 2 or 3 before November, but Hunter's going to go on trial in September for the fraud, which is a nice way of saying corruption and bribery, international corruption and bribery and treason. Yeah, nice way of framing that is that it's just some sort of tax fraud. But yeah, there's a whole other trial coming up for that.
Can we add one thing to that? Because that was an excellent summary of the situation, but I felt that you skipped over one very important part there. And that is exactly where the 2 trials that have been held so far have been found. Let's begin with the Trump trial. This was held in New York, in a district that is notoriously anti-Trump. So it wouldn't be difficult to find a jury that is anti-Trump there. Basically, if you just throw something at the random person in New York, chances are that person is going to be anti-Trump. You're going to have to work very hard to find someone who is even neutral, let alone pro-Trump there. So you might have a jury there that's biased against him. In addition to, obviously, you have a judge that is completely and utterly biased there, and more have come out about that. And now when even the jury instruction was, it doesn't matter what you think, you just find something, anything. That's kind of like the jury instruction there. Just find him guilty no matter what. So that's a setup for the New York trial. Now, Bo, remind me, where was the Biden trial?
I believe it was in Delaware, wasn't it?
Exactly. That was in the Biden stronghold. This is where Biden has the absolute most support that they have anywhere in the entire country. So he was primed to have the absolutely friendliest jury, statistically, he possibly could have, because he is one of them. And of course, Trump is also from New York, but he is different from the people of New York who don't like him. But the people in Delaware as a whole, up until very recently, have liked the Bidens a great deal. It's only recently that the polls have started slipping even there. But even there, Delaware is still prime Biden territory. And in that territory, he was still found guilty by a jury on all counts. This is a very important distinction. I just felt that that needs to be had right there. Trump found guilty by hostile jury, or in hostile territory. Biden found guilty in friendly territory.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. No, Delaware is, but Biden is Delaware. The Biden family, they are Delaware, right? Okay, it's where they live. So yeah, it couldn't have been in a better place. I think with Trump, it was obviously in New York. I'm not sure if it was the actual Southern District of New York. I don't think it was, because it's almost a cliche with the Southern District of New York. Yeah, I think it was just the New York grand jury. So in the Southern District of New York, that is where you will, if you're going to try some of the biggest criminals, where you want a prosecutor who is completely fearless, right? If you're going to try like John Gotti or something, or you're going to extradite a Mexican cartel leader, you try him probably in the Southern District of New York. Okay, I think I might be wrong. I hope I'm not wrong, but I think because in other words, they're very, very serious prosecutors and lawyers. And they threw out when Alvin Bragg, the Attorney General of New York, brought this case against Trump. I think the Southern District said, no, there's no case there. We're not trying that. Don't make a fool out of us. And so they took it to another place. Anyway, of course, the Trump thing is sort of completely trumped up. And he was banned from, there was sort of some sort of gag order involved in it as well. So he's not even allowed to talk about it. Apparently, the proceedings of the actual trial itself were kind of laughable. In other words, that every time the prosecution wanted to do or say anything or bring anything into evidence, etc., they were always allowed to. And whenever the Trump, his defensive team wanted to object or do anything, they just immediately overruled. Apparently, that was the case. I followed the trial a bit, but not in fantastic detail. But I did follow it.
That should have been televised. Why was that trial televised or not?
No.
Why was that not televised? That should have been televised.
I believe that is just all to do with different states.
Yes, it's a state
just a different story. So, like in Britain, for example, we don't have it, do we?
We should, but yeah.
So there's the Trump thing, but of course you can still run for president even if you're convicted felon. So that won't stop him. But the thing I wanted to, sort of the overarching point I wanted to make is really about the wounds that this is doing to the United States of America, to the very fabric of the Republic of the United States of America. America really is now, and I don't want to be too alarmist, but on a slippery slope towards some very, very, very serious political problems. Now, America's had a good innings as a republic. No republic has lasted much longer than the United States has. A couple of 100 years, 200 years, that's a good innings for a republic. All republics die eventually. And now if you look at the Roman Republic, there are some very, very striking parallels with how the Roman Republic died and what is going on with the United States right now. I don't know if anyone else wanted to say anything, because I realize I've been speaking for quite a few minutes there without interruption.
No, honestly, keep going, it's fine.
Okay, so there's this period in the decline and fall of the Roman Republic where what they had, originally Rome was a monarchy back in the day, and by that I mean the mid 700s BC. Rome had kings from Romulus through to Tarquinius Superbus. Their last king was Superbus, and they threw them out, and they didn't want one man. They didn't want kings anymore. They didn't want one man to rule them all. They would become a republic, and they would have tribunes, what they call tribunes. And tribunes were allowed to veto laws. Laws would go before the public assembly, and then their Senate would green light them and okay them and rubber stamp them, and it would become a law. And and they had an office called a tribune, who in theory could veto anything, could make all government grind to a halt in Rome if they wanted to. Now, these tribunes didn't really use those powers, or certainly not very often. And the People's Assembly, what would be very, very roughly speaking, like a House of Commons or like your Congress, and it was the Senate that held all the power. Anyway, there's a lot more that could be said about that. In the age of Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus, about 80 odd years before, or a bit more, about 80 odd years before the Republic finally died, and historians always argue about exactly when that was. These tribunes started to subvert Roman politics, to subvert the Roman system, and to take power away from the Senate. And over a few generations, these tribunes were just murdered in the street by the establishment, by the deep state, if you like. They were just murdered, much like John and Robert Kennedy were murdered for being too anti-establishment. And then you get a period where two important generals and politicians, because in ancient Rome, a general and a politician were the same thing, the same people, called Gaius Marius and Lucius Cornelius Sulla. They had a sort of Cold War for a while, and they had factional fighting, and they started prosecuting each other. That's where we are in the United States story right now. They started prosecuting each other. When they couldn't really prosecute each other much more, you started getting street violence, street mobs. You see something like the BLM riots from a couple of years ago, obviously leftist Democrat street violence. In the end, the other side will get their own mobs eventually, and then quite soon you'll have one person, one side, one faction. It won't be Trump and Biden. This will probably be in another generation or two, or in a few years from now. It probably won't be Trump, but eventually there'll be street clashes to the point where the police can't deal with it anymore. It's too big for the police to deal with. You saw how poorly the police dealt with the BLM riots, basically let them run amok. At some point, both sides will be doing that, and the police won't be able to do much. And the authorities, whoever they are, will probably have to bring in the military to bring back order. Then the next step is some level of civil war. And then, in order for the civil war to finish, there'll have to be some sort of giant bloodletting, massacres on all sides. And the Republic is dead at that point. There's no more Republic anymore. You move into a position where you've probably got, they'll probably still call themselves senators and congressmen and the president, but they won't be like it used to be in the 19th century, in Jefferson's time, in Taft's time, in the time of FDR. They won't be the same thing anymore. It will be a monarchy in all but name. You'll have a king backed by the military in all but name. And that is where this is leading. This is how republics die, by the Justice Department being subverted politically to attack political opponents. And this is exactly where we are now with what's happening to Trump. Because if and when Trump does get back into office, you can't really blame him for trying to get some sort of revenge on his politicized enemies, the people in the Justice Department or the FBI or the Democrat Party that have perverted the course of justice and the nature of law as it should be. Well, it's I mean, the parallels with the full decline and fall of the Roman Republic and what's happening in the United States right now is to my mind really quite striking.
Well, it's I mean, it's almost justice to do that, isn't it? It would be an injustice not to take those people down if he got into power. So, like you say, you can't blame him, but you'd also blame you would almost blame him if he didn't do that, because then like you're allowing rats to sit in a chicken coop permanently at that point. They could do it again to anyone, whoever, wherever. So you almost want to do it to make an example out of them, but then it snowballs this sort of backwards and forwards.
Well, yeah, then it becomes a tit for tat. It becomes a vendetta, which is very difficult to ever solve.
Yeah, rather than the one side going, actually, you know what? Yeah, we fucked up. Soz. Like, you just get them out. It's fine. Soz. Right. But you're right. Yeah. I've been saying for a while. Societal decline. This, go on.
Yeah, well, because what really should the Democrats and the leftists in America, they lost their mind when Trump won in 2016. They lost their mind. What they should have done is taken that on the chin and accepted him as a legit president and not tried to subvert the nature of justice, right? Because they also obviously falsified the 2020 election as well.
They admitted it.
Right? Yeah. They basically admitted it. Yeah. So again, they've caused a very, very serious wound to the Republic by doing that. Those are bruises that will not heal. That's an open wound. Just like the murder of Tiberius Gracchus, the murder of John Kennedy is a wound that has never healed. Okay. What happened with Nixon is a wound that has never healed. And the way Trump has been and will go on, no doubt, to continue to be treated is something which is it's breaking the bones of the Republic, what they're doing. And you can't blame Trump. In fact, it would be sort of morally wrong not to try and drain the swamp if he gets into the White House again, not to try and drain the swamp much, much harder this time, not to try and rid the establishment of these bad actors, these evil actors. It would probably be more morally wrong not to do anything, to try and be high-minded and let them get away with it, because they won't stop. ideologically captured lefties will never ever stop. They're convinced they're on the right side of history. They're convinced that all ethics and morals and righteousness is on their side. And so it's difficult to see how you can reverse this process and go back to United States as it the way their politics works, sort of, you know, pre 2000s or pre World War II or during the 19th century, for example, where it worked really, really quite well. It worked amazingly well. It was an amazing example of a republic. Well, we don't live in those days anymore, unfortunately. We live in the days where it's starting to come apart at the seams. You've got people like AOC that would actively burn it down, or that little gang of, what's their little gang called? Their gang of four, whatever they're called. These people,
yeah.
I think they call them the gang, don't they? Sometimes, anyway.
No, it's another name.
The squad. Sorry,
the squad. Yes,
the squad.
The squad. Yeah.
These people would burn the United States to the ground if they could, and they obviously mean to. So, I fear. I do fear for the future of the United States, I'm afraid.
Yeah.